Hey, Superbook fans! Do you remember the last time we visited the amazing world of Bible adventures? We met Daniel, the young man who stayed faithful to God even when he was taken to the land of the Babylonians. Now we're back for another exciting adventure with our friend Daniel. But this time, Daniel will have to show incredible faith and courage. So buckle up for the story of Daniel and the lion's den. It all began when the Lord gave Daniel a vision of what was going to happen in the future. It wasn't a very pleasant vision. He saw that Babylon was going to fall and its people would be scattered. You can read about it in the book of Daniel, chapter 7 verses 13 to 14. Then in my vision at night, I saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days and was presented with everlasting dominion. Now, Daniel was really troubled by what he saw because he knew how powerful the Babylonian Empire was. So Daniel did something he had done many times before when he needed help from God. He got down on his knees and prayed, asking God for guidance. Daniel chapter 6, verse 10 says that every night he opened his window, which was on the side of his house that faced Jerusalem, and he prayed there 3 times a day. Now, this made the other officials and nobles in the empire very angry because they were jealous of Daniel. They wanted the king to make them the most important person in the empire, just like Daniel was. So they went to King Darius and said some very bad things about Daniel. They told him that Daniel had broken the law by praying to his God, but really, they just wanted to get rid of Daniel so they could take his place. So the king made a law that for 30 days no one was allowed to pray to anyone but him. If someone prayed to another god, they would be thrown into the lion's den, a big pit filled with hungry lions. And Daniel chapter 6 verse 15 says that this law was written in a scroll and sealed with the king's ring. The king couldn't go back on his word once the papers were sealed. That's why they called it the king's command. Daniel heard about the new law and he thought, now what am I gonna do? He knew he couldn't stop praying to God, not for one day. So, he prayed anyway. And when the jealous leaders found out, they ran to the king and said, hey look, we found Daniel praying to his God, just like we told you. So the king was furious. Even though he liked Daniel, he had to follow the law. So, he sent some guards to Daniel's house. They went to his house and took him to the palace. The king asked Daniel if what the men said was true and Daniel said, yes, it's true. I do pray 3 times a day to my God. Then the king said, well, you know that I made a law that you are not allowed to pray to any god but me. So now you have only one choice. You can either ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you, or I have to throw you into the lion's den. And that's exactly what happened. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. The guards quickly covered the entrance so no one could get out. And then the king returned the next morning to see what happened to Daniel. When he got there, he cried out in horror because the entrance to the den was covered and there was no way out. So the king grabbed his sword and tried to pry off the heavy stone cover, but it didn't budge. And then he heard a sound from inside the den. Lions started roaring. The king knew that whoever was in there wouldn't survive much longer. But before the king could come up with a plan, someone came running towards him. It was one of the guards, and he told the king, hey, I have good news. Last night the lions' mouths were shut, so no one was hurt. Then the king was overjoyed. He ran as fast as he could to the lion's den, and he shouted, Daniel, Daniel, the lions have not hurt you. So Daniel answered from inside the den, that's right, O king. The king was so happy to hear Daniel's voice that he ordered the guards to open the den. Then the crowd gathered around the lion's den and everyone waited for Daniel to come out. Daniel slowly came up out of the den. He walked past the crowd, and then he looked at the king and said, thanks for giving me such a wonderful gift. Everyone was shocked when they realized Daniel was okay. Especially the jealous leaders who had tricked the king into putting Daniel in the lion's den. But the king was mad at them for lying. He told them he had promised Daniel that he would be rewarded, and that's exactly what happened. In Daniel chapter 6 verse 28, it says that King Darius wrote this. This is the account of what happened. Then he wrote in the presence of the nobles and the officials, and the king's order was that Daniel's enemies were thrown into the lion's den, they and their children and their wives. But before the sun had gone down on them, they were torn apart in the den. Then Darius made this decree throughout the empire in all its provinces that everyone should fear and respect the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for he is the living God, and by him the nations of the world can be saved. To him belongs sovereignty through all the earth and in heaven, and he does all according to his will among the heavenly beings and among the people of earth. There are many lessons we can learn from the story of Daniel and the lion's den. One lesson is that God takes care of those who love and obey him. No matter what the circumstances look like, we can trust that God will protect us. Another lesson we can learn is that jealousy leads to evil. The jealous leaders wanted more power, so they lied to the king and caused Daniel to be put in the lion's den. Finally, the story teaches us that faith and courage bring victory. Daniel could have chosen to stop praying and live however he wanted. But he chose faithfulness instead. His courage to stand up for his beliefs led to his deliverance. Will you remember Daniel and the lion's den the next time you face a difficult decision? Will you choose faithfulness, or will you give in to peer pressure and do what everyone else wants you to do? Choose wisely. And thank you for joining us on this Bible adventure. God has exciting plans for your life. Put your faith in him and he will give you strength to face any challenge. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, Jesus loves you. Hey, Superbook fans! If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week.